After years of waiting, we've finally seen our first glimpse of gameplay in the new Hytale engine, revealed to us during our recent Hytale Thankmas stream where Buddhacat and John Hendricks blessed us with this very welcome surprise. And the footage they decided to show us just so happened to be the building tools. This couldn't have come at a better timing, as I just spent the last 2 weeks building the Thankmas server lobby and the new Save the Quebec maps, launch.skynode.gg if you want to play. So this is a feature that was fresh in my mind, and I was excited to compare it to Axiom. So when my hype finally died down, I went to work analyzing the footage, and I realized that this was really not exactly what I had been hoping for. That is to be expected though, as they did specify in the recent blog post that these tools are still at a very early stage. But even so, there are some things here that I find mildly concerning. Right away, we can see the inventory UI, and there are a lot of potential issues here, but the most important one is this right here. This is the Prefab Placer tool that we saw all the way back in 2019. Basically, you go into this menu and load a prefab, and then while holding this tool, it allows you to place it. Sounds great, right? And sure, the prefab feature in and of itself is great, but the way you use it, having to go into the menu to change prefabs every time, is way too clunky. The idea of using an item in your hotbar as tools for editing your world is at this point a relic from the past, a remnant derived from an old Bucket plugin called Voxel Sniper. This feature was born from the limitations of the Minecraft beta back in 2011, when adding new UI elements to the game was so inconvenient that builders would rather put up with sacrificing their precious hotbar space for their various tools and brushes. But with modding becoming more accessible, this clunky vestigial feature has since become obsolete and outdated, as it has gradually been replaced with new, much more efficient custom interfaces. Even back in 2019, when we first saw this feature, I thought it was a strange choice, and it's quite confusing and maybe a little disappointing to see that the idea for the tool interface still hasn't progressed much further than that level. That being said, I can't see why the Hytale team has stuck with this solution. After all these years, a lot of people actually choose to keep using this old plugin over all the new shiny features, despite the old way being way less efficient. You could chalk this up to just the old schoolers sticking to what they know, but I do actually think there is some value to placing your tools in your hotbar. At the point where a player starts messing around with creative mode, the hotbar is an interface that they've become intimately familiar with, and one that they can very intuitively navigate. And visually, your screen just looks more clean and approachable this way compared to having a bunch of extra interfaces. But maybe it's possible to use the hotbar for tools without clogging it up. Well, I'm not a professional UI artist, so once again I have requested the help of the legendary shocked Yarkony. Okay, so we want to use the hotbar, but we don't want to clog it. What do we do? Luckily, this has a very obvious solution. Just add more hotbars. Ta-da! As you can see, we've added another 2 hotbars to the creative inventory, one for prefabs and one for brushes. We've had to sacrifice a trash can for now, so let's remember to add that back in later. We'll also get into how you switch to these hotbars in just a moment, but first we have to fix this rudimentary list view for the prefabs over here. With our new system, we don't need these clunky prefab loading buttons anymore, so say goodbye to those. We've also got to get rid of these delete buttons. We wouldn't want people accidentally deleting their prefabs now, would we? All we're left with now are the names of the prefabs, but we will obviously want to add previews so we can actually see what they are, so we'll add that too, but instead of a list view, we'll place it on a grid. We also need to be a little more organized than this if we're ever going to be able to find our assets, so we absolutely have to add some folders. Very nice! That gives us some space to add back that trash button from earlier. And you know what? We can add back that list view from earlier, now with previews and other useful information like dimensions, block count, and when it was last edited. Now to get prefabs into your hotbar, you just grab it and drag it over. Easy. And if you want to delete the prefab, just drag it straight into the trash where it belongs. If you drag it from your hotbar though, it will only be removed from the hotbar, not deleted. It'll make sense when you use it. Okay, now let's fill up this taskbar so we can have a look at how it works. When we exit the inventory, we'll see that another key binding has been added to the screen. How curious. So now, when we hold Alt, we bring up the tool menu. Okay, so there's a lot more going on here right now, so let's just get into all these tools right away. You can select the tools by scrolling or hitting the number keys, and you can also control your mouse while holding down Alt, so you can also just click them. This first slot here is just regular build mode, which gives the player access to the regular hotbar. And if we keep holding Alt and scroll up, we'll see the next tool in line, which is the move tool. When you let go of Alt now, your hotbar will disappear, because we don't need it while using the move tool, but we will be needing the scroll wheel. The move tool should honestly just be the same as the one in Axiom. You make a selection box with left and right click, extrude the face of your selection with middle click, and scroll to move your selection in whichever direction you're looking. Next up is the copy tool, which works just like the move tool, except it does not delete the original position of your selection. Then we have the stack tool, which just stacks your selection in the direction you're looking while scrolling. This here is the smear tool, which basically takes the starting position of your selection and its new position, then just interpolates everything in between. The extrude tool doesn't actually use a selection box at all. You just look at a face and scroll to extrude or shrink all the connected faces of that type. With the erase tool, you can make a selection box and hit delete, or you can just look at a block and right click to remove all connected blocks of the same type. Alternatively, you can make this into a fill tool instead by bringing back the hotbar and make it so that you can fill in with whichever block you're holding. If you're not holding a block, it turns into erase mode, just like how Blockbench has an erase mode for its fill bucket. Hitting delete while you have a selection should probably delete your selection no matter which tool you have selected. And last of the Axiom style build tools would be the symmetry setup mode. It lets you place the symmetry node where you can add a flip modifier and a rotation modifier to either mirror or rotate around these axes. Once you have placed your node in the position you want and added your modifier, you should have to hit enter to set it, and your building hotbar will pop up. You can now build on one side of the axis, and depending on the modifier you put down, it will place a block on the other side of the axis. If you want to set up a new symmetry node, you will have to hit delete to get rid of the current node, and you will be sent back into node setup mode. If you want to keep building without symmetry, you just have to hold Alt and scroll back to the normal build mode, or hold Alt+1. We can also add an additional shortcut back to basic build mode by double clicking Alt. I think symmetry mode is a very cool feature, but it's also very dangerous. Almost every time I use it in Axiom, I forget about it and I build a bunch of blocks in the middle of nowhere, and while that might sound like a funny quirky situation, there's no way to undo it, so you can actually do a lot of damage to your builds if you mess up. So it will be extremely important to create a solid visual signifier showing when symmetry mode is enabled, which modifiers are applied, and where the symmetry node is located at any given time. It would also be very helpful if you added audio cues like doubling up block placement sound, maybe add some reverb and maybe some echo. And you can also add custom music to this mode, where you could utilize the call and response compositional technique and repetition in clever ways to make it super obvious that there's some sort of symmetry placement going on here. With something like this, you could get a good mix of functionality and identity added to this feature. I was also debating adding in a shape placer mode. There is a nice Minecraft mod called Effortless Building, which adds a selection wheel for different shapes and fill modifiers, so it could be something to look into, but designing a system like that is way out of my pay range of $0 per hour, so I'm just gonna leave it at that. But I should really get to the point, shouldn't I? So the brush tool is where you really see the voxel sniper aspect of this interface. While you're in brush mode, your hotbar changes to the brush hotbar, which you can customize in your inventory. Here you would be able to either pick a default brush or make your own custom brushes and give them a custom icon. And finally, what you've all been waiting for, the prefab mode. Since the prefab hotbar uses previews, it should expand a bit to make the icons more visible. Now you can just scroll over to the prefab you want and place it. To add a bit of extra flavor, add some glowing visual effects in front of the player's hand to make it seem like they're using magic. And when you've placed prefabs, don't just bake it into the world right away. Instead, you should treat them as components and give each prefab a little gizmo so you can move it around with your scroll wheel or by moving the arrows of the gizmo. And make it so that when you update the prefab, all of the placed prefabs update until you've applied and baked them into the world. If you also make prefabs globally available on multiplayer, other builders can edit the prefabs you've placed. Lightmatica is a good reference to look at for this kind of thing. Additionally, while you hold down Alt, you should be able to move around the gizmo with your mouse, and you'll also be given some options to enable auto-rotate, so it randomly changes rotation every time you place a prefab, auto-cycle, so that when you place a prefab, it automatically selects the next slot in your hotbar, and randomize, which jumbles your hotbar each time you place a prefab. So, to recap, with this solution we give builders 3 separate hotbars depending on their tool mode, which will help keep things more organized and will even make their usage more intuitive. Now, Minecraft does actually deploy a different solution for hotbar organization, which is the saved hotbars page. It uses the hotkey C combined with a number between 1 and 9 to save a hotbar, and the hotkey X combined with the same number to load the corresponding hotbar. This system is, well, Terrible, since most people don't even know about it. Either way, 9 hotbars is still better than 3, and we can't have that, so we need an even better solution. And what would be much better would be something like Victoria, where you can open up a screen with a whole bunch of hotbars, which you can easily change and swap between. So, in the inventory, we add a button next to each of the hotbars, which we can click to open the hotbar window. Here you can drag in any block, brush, or prefab into any slot, depending on which window you selected here on the right side. Back in an older Hytale blog post, it was shown that you can dual wield and change your item on the fly by hitting set. I don't know why they decided to put a cancel button at the bottom here, as I'd assume this radial menu disappears when you let go of set, but anyway, this feature isn't really needed in creative mode, so instead we can map this button for swapping hotbars. So, in creative mode, we swap this button out with the hotbar selector. Hold Z to open all your hotbars, then either scroll, hit the corresponding number key, or click to select the hotbar you want to equip. Let go of Z and the menu disappears. This menu could also be opened by clicking the button while in the tools window. I don't know if dual wielding still works like this, but it's either way a solution you should keep in mind. And holding X could bring up a radial menu just like in adventure mode, except it lets you pick blocks related to the one you're holding. So like, if you're holding planks, you could pick between other plank types, stone would give you other stone types, and so on. I've also thought of a color wheel that lets you pick out blocks by their average color. That would be super nice. It could probably be available in the inventory window though. For now, we'll focus on the tool window. And that brings us up here in the top left corner of the screen. This info about the modes is really nice, but there's not a single use case where this needs to be shown at all times, so I think it should be more of a hold to show kind of deal rather than something you can toggle the visibility for. Luckily, we have the perfect button for this, the tool menu, so now when you hold down your Alt key, you also see this information on your screen. Now, I don't know how you toggle these modes in the game. At this early stage, I'd assume it's done through commands, but really it needs an interface that can be easily accessed. Well, how about adding the toggles to the tool screen as well? And would you look at that, there are now a bunch of toggles available with a simple key press. And next, you're going to say, oh, what's this? There are a bunch of new modes added. Well, you see, Mr. Hytale Hypixel, you've made one fatal miscalculation. You've left out the building modifier that any builder worth their salt can't live without, the block replacement mode. When you need to replace a block, you can now simply look at it, right-click, and through powerful magic, the atoms in the block are broken down into their core components and transmuted into that of the block you're holding. This removes 50% of the steps needed in each operation, so it's a massive time saver. And when you add on top of that the infinite block placement speed while in this mode, you can increase your power level to over 9,000, I mean your efficiency by a lot. This mode is super useful, so let's give it a hotkey too, like B. It may seem confusing to everyone else why you haven't added this mode already, but to me it's quite obvious. There is a traitor on the inside trying to sabotage the game, but while they might have outsmarted you, I have outsmarted their outsmarting, and... Anyway, the point is, this mode is extremely important and it would be embarrassing to not have it on launch. This feature is an absolute must-have that's present in pretty much every building mod, and I don't think I would even enjoy building if it's not available, so if you haven't already, get on it. This is not the only mode you should add though. Axiom has this really neat feature called Fast Place. When you hold down right click, you place a block. Then when you look at the block that you haven't placed since hitting right click, it instantly places another block. This lets you place blocks in a very controlled manner by making these stroking motions, which is very intuitive and actually kind of satisfying. I don't think anyone except the genius creator of Axiom, Mulberry, which you should hire, could come up with a feature like this, so you should hire him yesterday. Oh, and there should be a toggle for fast break too, just saying. Force Place would be an important toggle which can allow you to place blocks in places where you otherwise couldn't. Midair Place would allow us to place blocks in the middle of the air, and No Updates would be a necessary toggle for when you want your block placements to be static. So for example, placing sand that doesn't fall or placing water that doesn't flow. There's nothing more annoying than building with water with block updates on. And there needs to be something akin to Axiom's Tinker mode, which works like a debug stick, except it only works while you're not holding anything, and it's way more intelligent. For example, you can toggle the shape of a stair block depending on where you right-click it. You can toggle block positions, fences and walls. You can mix blocks, like adding moss to cobblestone, make paths, and it also comes with neat bonus features like being able to break individual slabs. Also, one little feature I've been thinking of lately that I've never seen before would be Ghost Mode. It would basically do two things: stop you from triggering mechanisms and make you unobstructed by anything that could impede your movement. So, like a ghost, it would let you walk through doors, trapdoors and the like, and it would also negate any effect that would make you move slowly. And stuff like pressure plates or tripwires wouldn't get triggered by you or even your projectiles. This would be super helpful when building interiors, where you might have to walk through a lot of doors that are supposed to be closed, so you have to keep closing them after yourself, and they could be really annoying to have to fly through with no clip, and you might be making some intricate traps that you really don't want to trigger while building them. And I just realized that maybe there should be a mode to increase your damage so you can kill all mobs more easily. There might be a better way to do that though, so I'm not sure. Okay, so I mentioned earlier that we should set the Hotbar Swapper key to SED to give the creative mode feature some continuity with dual wielding in adventure mode, but as you might have noticed from the footage here, the undo keybind has already been set to SED. And the reason I didn't mention this earlier is that it's an incredibly bad idea, and I need to address it in length. I'm sure this decision came down to accessibility. It's easier to hit a single key if you have reduced motor function, and it's easier to understand for kids that are familiar with playing the game on console but have little experience with computer interfaces. But from a mentor's perspective, this particular decision is not going to do the kids any favors. This is going to be a lot of children's first encounter with any sort of advanced computer tool, period, which makes this the perfect moment to teach them the common key bindings that are used on computers, which they will have a guaranteed use for outside of video games as well. And as you should know, if you make undo a single key press, it will be hit on accident all the time. Especially if you're used to hitting SED in adventure mode to use your dual wield. And so of course you'll end up pressing it from muscle memory. Or you're using these tools while chatting with others, or you're like me who fat fingers the keys all the time. Now I see there's an action history that pops up on the screen when you perform an action, which does help with this issue, as it makes it more obvious when you have done something by accident, but it disappears fairly quickly so you won't always notice. But imagine you've pasted in a huge castle, and then gone in and built an interior, changed out all the walls, made complex changes to it, and then your friend, Sorble, logs on, and then you start typing, "Oh hello Sorble," and you realize that you didn't open the chat window to type it, and whoop, your castle just vanished, and all you're left with is a bunch of floating chairs and walls. And even if you're able to redo the paste action, you're probably going to override most of that progress you made by hand. There's also the possibility that you've made more actions after accidentally hitting undo, so it's going to be important to be able to go into the action history log, which should really be as long as possible, with timestamps for when they happened, as well as how many blocks were affected, so it's easier to tell previous actions apart. Redo should obviously be bound to Ctrl+Y, but please make an additional key binding here for Ctrl+Shift+Z for people who are used to using Photoshop and may end up using these tools at the same time. At the very least, please make the undo bound to Ctrl+Z by default and let people who want to suffer through the plain Z binding change that in the settings. If you can't physically press two buttons at once, you don't really have any options in that case, so that would be fair. To make it easier for them, you should add a key binding preset for anyone with that kind of disability. And make it Ctrl+Z for German and Swiss keyboards as well, as they use the same key binding even though the keys are in different places. And speaking of Switzerland, setting the copy hotkey to B is probably a breach of the Geneva Convention, so just don't do that. I also see there's a toggle to enter adventure mode with M for mode, presumably. That is an interesting decision. I can't wait to accidentally hit M, then fall to my death and lose my meticulously picked out hotbar. That sounds like good fun. Oh yeah, I just realized you should probably add keep inventory to the toggle menu, by the way. Anyway, that concludes everything I had to say about these tools so far, but I really hope that you're going to give us a proper editor mode. With custom brushes, this menu could be super nice and customizable, but going in and out of a menu, that's just too clunky. I don't want to talk about the editor mode too much though, as it's really outside the scope of this video, and I don't want to make another hour-and-a-half long video like I did with voice chat. All I'll say is that it would be an incredibly arduous task to implement, so the best way to do it would honestly be just by hiring Mulberry. If he hasn't applied for the current tools engineer role already, you should stop whatever you are doing right now and actively reach out to him. Having already made all the systems himself, he would be the equivalent of having a whole team worth of efficiency. He would have no issue with working with C++, and he's made scriptable Lua brushes already for Axiom by himself. Mulberry is awesome, by the way. For Hytale Thankmas, he granted us multiplayer support, which normally costs $25 a month, so that we could use Axiom to build the maps we needed. So huge props to him, as we would not have gotten that done on time without his tools. But yeah, the bottom line is that when a player is in creative mode, you want them to feel like a god. Not just a painter or someone playing with Lego. They should feel like an omnipotent being that can do anything with a few couple of actions with lightning fast efficiency. It's good that you're getting creators on board now to give feedback on your tools, so you can hopefully reach that point, but it will also be important to reach out to specific creators that actually care about your project. The Hytale community has some of the most talented programmers ever, like Titus Evans, Ryan H. Code, and Hugo from Nox Crew. People like this should be directly involved, as they would provide way more value than anyone who's just vaguely aware of what Hytale is. Only people who are truly interested would make, say, a 20-minute video on how you can improve your systems for free. So to summarize, what you should do is keep working on an accessible first-person creative builder mode where you can interact with the world in a familiar way and still have a lot of precision, but sooner or later you're going to have to add a proper editor mode where you have greater control of your world through an advanced user interface, and for that you're going to want Mulberry if it's going to happen in this decade. Despite all my gripes, I'm still very happy to see all this progress. I know the team worked really hard to get everything working on the new engine, and I'm very happy you all managed to hit your deadlines for the year. And besides, all my criticisms are instantly negated by the music we got with the footage anyway.